Deep in the highlands of Ethiopia, hidden among rugged mountains and sweeping valleys, lies one of the greatest architectural enigmas the world has ever seen: the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela. Carved entirely from solid volcanic rock more than 800 years ago, these towering structures seem to defy the very limits of human ingenuity. Imagine standing before a church not built from the ground up, but chiseled downward into the earth, its intricate columns, arches, and passageways emerging from the living stone itself. These aren't just buildings, they're miracles of engineering, so astonishing they've earned the nickname the eighth wonder of the world. And yet, the most baffling question remains: how were they created? The legends say angels worked alongside humans under the cover of darkness, their divine hands shaping the rock. Others whisper of lost technologies or secret knowledge passed down through generations. But the truth, it's buried somewhere between faith, history, and the sheer determination of a people who refuse to let the impossible stand in their way. This is a place where every chisel mark tells a story, where the walls hum with the echoes of ancient craftsmen whose methods still puzzle experts today. From the iconic cross-shaped church of St. George to the sprawling network of tunnels connecting sacred spaces, Lalibela isn't just a religious site, it's a riddle carved in stone. So how did a medieval kingdom without modern tools or blueprints accomplish what seems unthinkable even now? Who were the masterminds behind this sacred labyrinth, and what drove them to undertake such a monumental task? The answers lie woven into the fabric of myth and history, waiting to be unraveled. As we journey through the secrets of Lalibela's creation, you'll discover theories that challenge everything we know about ancient engineering, stories of devotion that border on the supernatural, and clues hidden in plain sight. This isn't just a tour of breathtaking architecture, it's a detective story etched in stone, and you're about to become part of the investigation. To understand the mystery of Lalibela's churches, we must first meet the man whose name they bear, King Lalibela, a ruler shrouded in as much legend as the structures themselves. Born in the 12th century, Lalibela wasn't just a king. He was a visionary, a devout Christian who dared to dream of a new Jerusalem on African soil. According to Ethiopian tradition, his ambition didn't come from earthly ambition alone. It was divinely inspired. The stories say he was poisoned as a child by a jealous relative, only to fall into a 3-day coma where angels carried him to heaven. There, God himself commanded him to return and build a holy city unlike any the world had seen. And when he awoke, he did just that. But here's where history tangles with myth. Lalibela's project wasn't just a construction site, it was a spiritual undertaking of epic proportions. Local accounts claim the work was miraculously accelerated, with angels laboring beside masons by night, their celestial tools shaping stone faster than human hands ever could. Some even say the churches were completed in just 24 years, an unthinkable feat for structures of such scale and precision. Skeptics dismiss these tales as pious exaggeration, but the faithful see them as proof of divine intervention. What's undeniable is the sheer audacity of Lalibela's vision. With no cranes, no steel, no modern engineering, his workers, whether aided by angels or not, carved 11 churches from single blocks of rock, each one a masterpiece of symmetry and sacred symbolism. The most famous, Biete Giyorgis, or the Church of St. George, stands in perfect cruciform, its roof a towering cross visible only from above, as if reaching toward heaven. Was this the work of a king or something greater? The line between history and legend blurs in Lalibela, where every chisel stroke seems to whisper of both human grit and heavenly grace. And yet, the mystery deepens. If angels truly helped, why do the churches bear the unmistakable marks of human tools? Why do the architectural styles echo techniques used centuries earlier in Axum, Lalibela's predecessor? The answer may lie not in choosing between faith and fact, but in recognizing how they intertwine. Lalibela's legacy isn't just stone, it's the story of a people who believed the impossible was merely a challenge waiting to be met. Whether divine or mortal hands shaped these walls, one truth remains: they stand as a testament to what happens when unwavering faith meets unbreakable will. Perched nearly 2.5 miles above sea level in Ethiopia's Amhara highlands, Lalibela's remote location adds another layer of mystery to its towering stone churches. This isn't just any landscape, it's a dramatic plateau of rust-red cliffs and rolling valleys, where the thin air and rugged terrain make even basic construction a formidable challenge. Yet the very geology that made this site so inhospitable also provided the key to its grandeur: a thick layer of volcanic tuff, the unusual rock that became the canvas for Lalibela's sacred masterpieces. Unlike granite or basalt, which would have been nearly impossible to carve with medieval tools, this tuff had a magical quality, soft enough to shape when first exposed to air, yet hardening over time into a durable shell. Picture a material as workable as clay in the hands of skilled artisans, but one that could endure centuries of wind, rain, and earthquakes once set. The craftsmen of Lalibela didn't just carve churches, they sculpted them like living sculptures, exploiting the rock's natural weaknesses to create doorways, windows, and delicate fretwork that would crumble in harder stone. But this choice of material raises burning questions. How did workers excavate downward, removing hundreds of tons of rock without modern machinery? The trenches around each church plunge as deep as 40 feet, with no evidence of scaffolding or supports to prevent collapses. Some scholars suggest they used a method called quarrying in the negative, chiseling from the top down while leaving strategic columns of untouched stone as temporary braces. Others point to the network of drainage channels, hinting at an ingenious understanding of water's erosive power to help loosen rock. And then there's the puzzle of precision. How did they achieve such flawless symmetry, smooth surfaces, and intricate detailing without metal tools harder than the tuff itself? The answers might lie hidden in the landscape. Nearby quarries show unfinished blocks and trial carvings, suggesting generations of experimentation. The reddish streaks in the rock, caused by varying mineral deposits, may have served as a natural blueprint: softer layers for intricate work, harder ones for structural support. Even the altitude played a role, with cooler temperatures preventing the tuff from drying too quickly and cracking during carving. Every detail of Lalibela's geology seems to whisper that this wasn't just a construction site, but a collaboration between human genius and the earth itself. Yet for all we can explain, the sheer scale of labor remains staggering. Conservative estimates suggest over 400,000 cubic feet of rock were removed, equivalent to clearing a football field buried 10 feet deep. Whether by divine inspiration or backbreaking perseverance, the builders transformed a mountainside into a testament of faith, one strike of the hammer at a time. The stones of Lalibela don't just hold up roofs, they hold secrets, waiting for the next curious mind to listen. What makes Lalibela's churches truly extraordinary isn't just that they were carved from rock, it's how they were carved. These aren't buildings assembled stone by stone, they're sculptures on a monumental scale, each church painstakingly freed from a single, massive block of volcanic tuff. Imagine standing at the edge of a 40-foot deep trench, peering down at a fully formed cathedral below ground level, its roof flush with the Earth's surface. This reverse engineering defies conventional construction logic. While most architects think upward, Lalibela's craftsmen thought downward, excavating not just the buildings but the very space around them, a feat akin to sculpting a cathedral from the inside out. Take Biete Medhane Alem, the largest monolithic church in the world. Its outer walls were revealed by carving away everything not part of the church, leaving a freestanding structure with 34 towering columns, each one a permanent part of the original rock. The precision is staggering. Doorways align perfectly with celestial events, window lattices filter light into sacred patterns, and interior arches mirror the curves of Byzantine designs. all achieved without sketches or measuring tools as we know them. Compare this to India's Kailasa temple or Jordan's Petra, and a striking difference emerges. Those wonders were carved into cliff faces, their facades chiseled from rock inward. Lalibela's churches, by contrast, are fully detached from the surrounding earth, like gems pried loose from bedrock. The interiors deepen the mystery. Step inside Biete Medhane and you'll find pillars crowned with carved capitals, vaulted ceilings echoing Byzantine hymns, and even a baptismal pool fed by a natural spring, all elements subtracted from solid stone. How did artisans ensure the ceiling wouldn't collapse as they hollowed it out? How did they carve delicate geometric reliefs into walls without the stone crumbling? The answer lies in their intimate knowledge of the material's behavior. They worked with the rock's natural grain, following soft veins for intricate details and leaving harder layers for structural support. But the most haunting question isn't technical, it's human. These churches weren't built by slaves or paid laborers according to Ethiopian tradition. They were shaped by volunteers working day and night in shifts, fueled by faith alone. Every chisel strike was an act of devotion, every inch of exposed wall a prayer made tangible. That's why Lalibela's architecture feels alive, not just because it breathes with hidden tunnels and echoing chambers, but because it pulses with the collective heartbeat of those who believed no obstacle was too great when heaven was the blueprint. The story of Lalibela's churches isn't just about architecture or faith, it's a tale of political survival. Enter the Zagwe dynasty, the ruling power behind this audacious project. In the 12th century, Ethiopia was a Christian island in a rising sea of Islamic expansion. Muslim dynasties controlled key trade routes, cutting off the faithful from the holy city of Jerusalem. For the Zagwe kings, this wasn't just a spiritual crisis, it was an existential threat. Their solution: create a new Jerusalem right in the heart of Ethiopia, a pilgrimage site so awe-inspiring it would solidify their legitimacy as God's chosen rulers. King Lalibela's vision went beyond mere imitation. Every detail of the churches mirrors Jerusalem's sacred geography. The river Jordan becomes a trench filled with holy water. The tomb of Christ is echoed in the church of Golgotha. Even the layout replicates the holy city's symbolic pathways. This wasn't just devotion, it was political theater on a divine scale. By offering Ethiopian Christians a pilgrimage destination within their own borders, the Zagwe dynasty countered the loss of access to Jerusalem while positioning themselves as the defenders of the faith. The message was clear: God's kingdom wasn't lost, it had merely moved. Yet the Zagwe's motives weren't purely altruistic. Historians argue that the churches served as a power play in a fragile kingdom. The dynasty had seized control from the older Aksumite rulers, and their claim to the throne was tenuous at best. Lavish religious projects like Lalibela became a way to buy divine favor and popular loyalty. Local legends even suggest that Lalibela's name, meaning "the bees recognize his sovereignty," was bestowed after a swarm of bees symbolizing God's anointing swarmed around his cradle. Whether fact or fabrication, this story reveals how deeply the Zagwe tied their rule to celestial endorsement. The timing was no accident. While Saladin's forces reclaimed Jerusalem from Crusaders in 1187, Lalibela's builders were carving their own holy city into the Ethiopian highlands. Some scholars see this as a deliberate response, a defiant statement that Christianity's heart still beat strong, even if its original home was lost. The churches became a spiritual fortress, their very stone radiating resilience. But the Zagwe's grand plan had a tragic flaw. Despite their devotion, the dynasty fell barely a century later, overthrown by rivals claiming descent from King Solomon. Ironically, Lalibela's churches outlasted the kings who commissioned them, transforming from political tools into eternal sanctuaries. Today, they stand not as monuments to a dynasty's ambition, but as testaments to humanity's unshakable need for sacred spaces carved not just into rock, but into the soul of a people. One of the most baffling gaps in the Lalibela mystery isn't just how these churches were carved, it's what they were carved with. To this day, not a single tool, blueprint, or even a written record of the construction process has been discovered. This absence is deafening. Modern engineers can study the pyramids and find remnants of ramps or copper chisels, but Lalibela's builders left behind no clues, as if the churches simply emerged from the earth fully formed. So what kind of technology could have achieved this? The theories range from the pragmatic to the extraordinary. Some researchers argue the workers used simple iron tools hardened through a process lost to time. Ethiopian blacksmiths were renowned for their metalwork, crafting swords and plows with techniques passed down since the Aksumite Empire. Yet volcanic tuff, while softer than granite, would have blunted iron chisels within hours. This raises another possibility: fire. There are scorch marks on certain church walls, hinting that builders may have heated the rock before dousing it with water, causing it to crack along precise lines. It's a method seen in ancient Egyptian quarries, but Lalibela's intricate details suggest something more refined. Then there's the water theory. The churches sit atop a network of trenches that still fill during the rainy season, and some scholars believe these weren't just for drainage. By channeling water into carefully carved fissures, workers could have used erosion as a natural chisel, letting time and gravity do the heavy lifting. It's a clever solution, but it doesn't explain the flawless symmetry of the arches or the delicate fretwork adorning windows. Perhaps the most compelling clue lies in the churches themselves. The tool marks still visible on the walls don't match the gouges left by ordinary hammers and chisels. Instead, they show smooth, consistent grooves, almost as if the rock was worked like wood. This has led to speculation about lost techniques, like using sharpened obsidian or even hardened leather tools that could carve without leaving telltale metal traces. Yet the absence of tools might not be an accident at all. In medieval Ethiopia, craftsmanship was sacred, and artisans often buried or melted their tools after completing holy projects as an offering. Could this explain why no chisels or drawings survived? Or was there a deliberate effort to shroud the methods in mystery, turning the churches into literal acts of faith? The silence of the stone speaks volumes not just about how Lalibela was built, but why its secrets were meant to endure. Beneath the soaring arches and sunlit courtyards of Lalibela's churches lies another world, a shadowy labyrinth of tunnels, staircases, and hidden chambers weaving through the rock like veins in a living body. These aren't just passageways, they're a subterranean puzzle, some wide enough for processions, others so narrow you must turn sideways to squeeze through. One moment you're in a sun-drenched courtyard, the next you're descending into a cool, dim corridor that suddenly opens into a chapel bathed in flickering candlelight. This network doesn't just connect the churches, it binds them into a single, breathing organism where every turn holds another layer of mystery. Theories about their purpose are as tangled as the tunnels themselves. Some scholars argue they served as symbolic pathways for pilgrims, recreating the spiritual journey of Christ's Passion. The most famous, a 35-meter trench dubbed the Trench of Jordan, forces travelers to wade through knee-deep water, a ritual reenactment of baptism before reaching the church of Biete Medhane. Others point to strategic design. These corridors could have been escape routes during attacks, their twisting layouts confusing invaders. There's even evidence they functioned as aqueducts, channeling rainwater from the highland springs to cisterns beneath the churches, a feat of hydraulic engineering disguised as sacred architecture. But the most intriguing possibility, these tunnels weren't just for worship or survival, they were part of the construction process itself. Narrow shafts near church ceilings match tool marks found inside, suggesting workers carved downward from the surface, then tunneled horizontally to hollow out interiors. Imagine teams passing rock debris hand to hand through these claustrophobic channels, their flickering oil lamps staining the walls with soot still visible today. The tunnels might also explain Lalibela's acoustic marvels. Certain passages amplify chants into eerie, resonant harmonies as if the stone itself sings. Yet for all their practicality, these underground arteries pulse with symbolism. Some align with solstice sunrises, lighting up hidden carvings only on specific days. Others dead-end at blank walls, perhaps representing spiritual dead ends or unfinished divine plans. The most haunting is a low, zigzagging tunnel called the Path of Darkness, where pilgrims crawl on hands and knees, emerging into sunlight as a metaphor for rebirth. Whether practical or mystical, these tunnels remind us that Lalibela's genius wasn't just in what rises above ground, but in the secrets buried beneath. The layout of Lalibela's churches is no accident. It's a sacred map carved into the earth itself. The 11 churches are split into 2 distinct clusters, divided by a 30-meter-long trench filled with water, known symbolically as the River Jordan. On one side, the northern group represents earthly Jerusalem, with churches like Biete Medhane Alem and Biete Mariam mirroring the holy sites Christ would have known. Cross the trench to the southern group, and you enter celestial Jerusalem, where structures like Biete Gabriel and Biete Abba Libanos echo the heavenly kingdom described in Scripture. This isn't just architecture, it's theology in stone, a pilgrimage route compressed into a single, awe-inspiring complex. The symbolism runs deeper than mere imitation. The dividing trench isn't just a symbolic river. It's a boundary between the mortal and divine, a physical manifestation of spiritual transition. Pilgrims wading through its waters reenact baptism, emerging on the southern bank as if reborn into a higher realm. Even the church's positioning tells a story. Biete Giyorgis in the northern group houses a replica of Christ's tomb, while the southern cluster's Biete Emmanuel, with its sheer walls and secluded chambers, evokes the mystery of ascension. Every step through Lalibela is a journey through the Christian narrative, from suffering to transcendence. But the celestial connections don't stop there. Certain churches align with astronomical events in ways that defy coincidence. Biete Giyorgis, the iconic cross-shaped church, sits slightly apart from the main groups, its roof perfectly oriented so the sunlight strikes its arms at equinoxes, casting shadows that trace the shape of a cross across the courtyard. Meanwhile, narrow windows in Biete Abba Libanos frame the rising sun during specific feast days, flooding the interior with light that illuminates carvings of saints and angels. Were these alignments intentional? Local priests whisper of star charts passed down through generations, and recent studies reveal that key sightlines match constellations visible during Lalibela's construction era. The precision suggests more than religious devotion. It hints at a lost fusion of faith and astronomy. Some researchers propose the entire complex functions as a colossal calendar, with solstice sunrises and lunar cycles marked by shadows slipping through strategically placed openings. Even the trenches might play a role. During the rainy season, reflections of certain churches ripple in the water, creating optical illusions that align with celestial bodies at specific times. Whether by design or divine inspiration, Lalibela's builders seem to knit the heavens into the very rock, turning the landscape into a dialogue between earth and sky. Yet the most poignant detail lies in the imperfections. Unlike the rigid symmetry of European cathedrals, Lalibela's layout curves with the terrain, its streets winding like ancient pathways. This wasn't a slavish copy of Jerusalem, it was an adaptation, a reimagining that honored the original while rooting it firmly in Ethiopian soil. The message is clear: holiness isn't confined to one place or one people. It's a living force, as malleable as the volcanic tuff and as boundless as the stars above. Biete Medhane Alem isn't just a church, it's a colossal declaration carved in stone. As the largest monolithic church on Earth, this labyrinth of devotion stretches over 800 square meters, its roof level with the surrounding ground, as if the earth itself cradles a sacred secret. Step inside and you're greeted by 72 towering pillars, each one hewn from the living rock, standing in perfect rows like silent sentinels of faith. But these aren't mere supports, they're storytellers. Local tradition claims each pillar represents one of Christ's disciples, their smooth surfaces whispering of a time when heaven and earth collided in Lalibela's highlands. The scale alone defies belief. To carve such a cavernous interior large enough to hold congregations of hundreds, medieval workers had to remove over 15,000 cubic feet of volcanic tuff. That's the equivalent of hollowing out a 3-story building from solid rock with nothing but hand tools and sheer determination. The precision is even more staggering. The pillars taper slightly upward, a subtle optical illusion that makes them appear taller when viewed from below, while the ceiling's arches distribute weight so perfectly that not a single crack mars their surface after 8 centuries. Modern engineers still debate how they achieved such flawless geometry without theodolites or blueprints. Yet Biete Medhane Alem's greatest mystery isn't its construction, it's what it once held. Ethiopian law insists this was the Ark of the Covenant's temporary sanctuary, brought here for safekeeping during times of war. Imagine the scene, priests chanting in the dim light, their shadows dancing across walls that cradled the most sacred relic in Judeo-Christian tradition. The church's eastern alcove still bears the marks of this legend, a recessed chamber with worn steps where some believe the ark rested beneath a canopy of embroidered cloth. Skeptics dismiss it as myth, but carbon dating reveals the alcove's carvings match the era when Lalibela's kings claimed descent from King Solomon himself. Walk the perimeter and you'll find another clue: 12 small chapels branching off the main hall, each dedicated to an apostle. Their doors are so narrow, worshippers must turn sideways to enter, a physical reminder of humility before the divine. But peer closer and you'll notice something extraordinary. The chapel's interiors vary dramatically in style, from Coptic domes to Byzantine arches. This isn't just random variation, it's a coded map of early Christian unity, a stone manifesto declaring that faith transcends borders. Today, Biete Medhane Alem stands as both monument and mystery. Its pillars still gleam under flickering oil lamps, their surfaces worn smooth by generations of pressed foreheads and whispered prayers. The air thrums with chants that haven't changed in centuries, echoing off walls that might have once echoed with the footsteps of ark-bearers. Whether you see it as a feat of engineering or a vessel of the divine, one truth remains: this church doesn't just hold up a roof, it holds the weight of centuries, a testament to what happens when human hands dare to carve the impossible from stubborn stone. Isolated from Lalibela's main clusters, standing alone in a deep pit of rust-colored rock, Biete Giyorgis, the Church of St. George is the crown jewel of this sacred complex. Unlike the interconnected northern and southern groups, this church sits apart, its iconic cross-shaped roof visible only from above, as if designed to be admired by the heavens themselves. Carved in the form of a perfect Greek cross with equal arms, it plunges 40 feet downward, its walls so smooth and symmetrical they seem sculpted by something beyond human hands. But what makes this church truly extraordinary isn't just its isolation or its form, it's the whispered legends that cling to its walls, suggesting this wasn't just another house of worship, but a royal sanctuary meant for kings and angels. Walk the perimeter and you'll notice something peculiar. The trench surrounding Biete Giyorgis is deeper and steeper than those around other churches, almost like a moat separating it from the mundane world. This wasn't accidental. Historians speculate its seclusion served a dual purpose, symbolizing both the transcendence of St. George, Ethiopia's patron saint, and the elevated status of those who worshipped here. Unlike the communal spaces of Biete Medhane Alem or Biete Mariam, this church's intimate interior, with its single entrance and narrow stairway, hints at exclusivity. The carvings here are finer, the details more meticulous, as if crafted for an audience accustomed to divinity. Local priests still speak of midnight ceremonies where rulers communed with celestial protectors, their prayers echoing through the cross-shaped chamber. Then there's the matter of alignment. While other churches follow traditional east-west orientations, Biete Giyorgis twists slightly, its arms aligning not with cardinal directions but with celestial events. During the equinoxes, sunlight strikes the roof at such an angle that the shadow it casts forms a second, phantom cross on the courtyard floor, a phenomenon some believe was engineered as a heavenly sign of favor. Even the church's staircase tells a story. Its 39 steps, worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims, mirror the age of Christ at his crucifixion, turning every descent into a symbolic reenactment of sacrifice. But the most tantalizing clue lies beneath the altar. A narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through, winds downward into darkness before dead ending at a small, unmarked chamber. Some say this was a treasury for royal relics, others insist it's the resting place of a sacred text or weapon. The church's walls offer no answers, but their silence speaks volumes. In a complex where every church is a marvel, Biete Giyorgis stands apart, not just in distance but in mystery. Whether it was a king's private chapel or a celestial waypoint, one thing is certain: this isn't just a building. It's a question carved in stone, waiting for the right hands to trace its edges and divine its secrets. Beneath the sunlit courtyards and echoing prayer halls of Lalibela's churches lies a whispered secret, an underworld of untouched chambers, their entrances concealed by time and tradition. Local monks speak of hollow spaces behind walls, tunnels that twist deeper than any tourist map shows, and alcoves sealed centuries ago to protect what lies inside. Some claim these hidden rooms hold ancient manuscripts, parchments inscribed with lost gospels or forgotten histories of the Zagwe dynasty. Others swear by tales of golden relics, sacred objects so powerful they were buried rather than risk their discovery. But separating fact from legend isn't easy when faith and history intertwine like roots beneath these holy stones. The most persistent rumor centers on Biete Medhane, where ground-penetrating radar scans revealed anomalous voids in the rock that don't match any known blueprints. These aren't natural cavities. Their angular shapes suggest deliberate chambers, possibly storage spaces for treasures or protected scriptoriums where scribes once labored. But accessing them is another matter. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, guarding Lalibela's sanctity, restricts invasive exploration. Even modern archaeologists must tread carefully, balancing discovery with reverence. One priest described hearing echoes from behind a fresco in Biete Medhane hollow reverberations that hinted at a space beyond, yet no visible door exists. Such stories tempt researchers, but the church's stance is clear: some secrets are meant to stay buried. Then there's the enigma of the false floor in Biete Giyorgis. Pilgrims kneeling near the altar sometimes notice an unusual acoustics, a slight echo underfoot, as if standing atop a hidden cavity. 19th century accounts by European travelers mention a trapdoor leading to a lower level, but no such entrance has been officially documented. Infrared imaging suggests temperature variations in that spot, fueling speculation. Could it be a crypt, a treasury, or simply an unfinished excavation abandoned by medieval builders? The mystery deepens with each generation as priests quietly maintain that certain areas are not for outsiders. Technology offers tantalizing glimpses. In 2014, a team using LiDAR scanning discovered an incongruity, a vertical shaft near Biete Giyorgis, its top obscured by centuries of soil accumulation. The shaft's depth remains unknown. Attempts to lower cameras were halted when church officials intervened, citing concerns over disturbing resting spirits. Similar scans in the surrounding highlands hint at an even wilder possibility. Lalibela's known churches might be just the tip of the iceberg, with entire underground complexes still waiting beneath layers of volcanic rock. But the greatest challenge isn't technical, it's ethical. For the faithful, these chambers aren't archaeological curiosities, they're sacred trusts. A deacon once confided that certain tunnels are opened only during holy days, accessed by select clergy to retrieve what the earth keeps. Whether relics, texts, or something more ineffable, their power lies in remaining unseen. This tension between curiosity and reverence, discovery and devotion, echoes through Lalibela's shadowed passageways. The stones may harbor secrets, but perhaps their true purpose isn't to be found, but to remind us that some wonders are greater when left to the imagination. Among the many theories swirling around Lalibela's construction, few spark as much debate as the idea of outside influence, particularly the tantalizing claim that the Knights Templar might have played a role. This theory hinges on a curious historical coincidence. Lalibela's churches were carved during the same era the Templars vanished from Europe after their persecution in the early 14th century. Could these exiled knights, famed for their architectural prowess and rumored to possess sacred relics, have shared their secrets with Ethiopia's builders? Proponents point to the church's uncanny resemblance to European Romanesque designs, from the barrel vaults of Biete Medhane Alem to the intricate blind arcades echoing French cathedrals. Even the underground tunnels recall Templar legends of hidden passageways beneath their strongholds, but the evidence crumbles under scrutiny. While the architectural parallels are striking, they're also superficial. Lalibela's structural techniques, like quarrying downward instead of building upward, are uniquely Ethiopian, with roots in earlier Aksumite traditions. There's no record of Templars traveling this deep into Africa, nor any trace of the crosses, symbols, or artifacts they left everywhere they settled. The timeline is equally problematic. Lalibela's construction began decades before the Templars' disbandment, making their involvement a chronological impossibility. What some call Templar fingerprints might simply be universal solutions to the same engineering challenges, proof not of contact, but of human ingenuity repeating itself across continents. Another theory ties the churches to Coptic Egyptians, whose Christian community had centuries of rock-carving experience. The monastic cells of Wadi el-Natron and the cliff-hewn churches of Old Cairo show similar craftsmanship, and historical trade routes between Ethiopia and Egypt make cultural exchange plausible. Yet again, the details diverge. Coptic carvings rely on sandstone, a far softer medium than Lalibela's volcanic tuff, and their designs prioritize interior spaces over freestanding exteriors. The most compelling counterargument, Ethiopia's own rich tradition of monolithic architecture, stretching back to the pre-Christian stelae of Aksum. Lalibela's builders didn't need foreign teachers, they stood on the shoulders of local giants. Then there's the most colorful hypothesis of all, extraterrestrial assistance. Ancient astronaut theorists cite the precision of the carvings and the absence of tool evidence as proof of otherworldly intervention. But this ignores the tangible clues left behind. The tool marks visible in unfinished sections match medieval Ethiopian implements, and the quarries nearby reveal trial carvings where artisans honed their skills. The real marvel isn't alien technology, it's the human capacity to innovate under pressure. What these theories share is a reluctance to credit medieval Africans with such mastery. The truth is far more inspiring. Lalibela's churches emerged from a vibrant, interconnected Christian world where knowledge flowed through pilgrims, merchants, and monks, not outsiders imposing their will, but a dialogue of faith and craftsmanship. The urge to credit foreigners or even extraterrestrials says more about modern biases than ancient realities. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't how Lalibela was built, but why we're so determined to believe it couldn't have been done by the people who claimed it all along. The legends passed down through generations of Ethiopian priests tell a story so vivid it feels alive. King Lalibela, guided by angels, directing thousands of workers who carved these churches in a single generation, their hammers ringing through the night as divine hands shaped the stone. But step into an archaeologist's lab and the narrative fractures. Carbon dating suggests the churches weren't built in 24 years, but over 2 centuries, with evidence of earlier structures beneath their foundations. Tools found in nearby quarries hint at trial-and-error experimentation, not celestial blueprints. This clash isn't just about timelines, it's a battle between two ways of knowing, one written in whispered prayers and sacred texts, the other etched in soil layers and tool marks. The oral traditions are unshakably precise. Priests at Biete Medhane still point to a column inside the church, its surface worn smooth by centuries of touching, and declare it was carved by an angel who left his handprint in the rock. They recite lists of craftsmen's names passed down orally for 800 years, their lineages preserved like scripture. The Zagwe dynasty's chronicles, transcribed in the 15th century text Kebra Nagast, describe Lalibela's vision as so urgent that work continued by torchlight, with shifts of laborers singing hymns as they chiseled. These accounts aren't just stories, they're living history, woven into the rituals of every church festival. Yet archaeology paints a messier picture. Excavations reveal phases of construction, earlier, cruder carvings beneath the current churches, suggesting the complex evolved over generations. The volcanic tuff itself holds clues. Tool grooves in unfinished sections match techniques from Aksumite stonemasons predating Lalibela by 400 years. Even the famed angelic precision falters under microscopes. Some pillars show signs of being reshaped after initial carving, their angles adjusted to correct mistakes. The most damning evidence, a single shard of pottery found beneath Biete Giyorgis' foundation, dated to the late 12th century, decades before Lalibela's reign. But dismissing the oral traditions as mere myth misses their deeper truth. For Ethiopian Christians, these churches aren't static monuments but living entities, their construction an ongoing spiritual event. When a priest insists angels directed the work, he's not denying human labor, he's affirming that faith transcends physical limits. This perspective finds unexpected support in cutting-edge archaeology. Studies of medieval work crews show how collective belief can drive extraordinary productivity, like Europe's cathedral building frenzies. The 24-year timeline might not hold up to radiocarbon dating, but as a metaphor for communal devotion, it's electrifying. The greatest reconciliation may lie in the landscape itself. Recent LiDAR scans reveal hidden quarries and abandoned half-carved blocks near Lalibela, proving the Zagwe dynasty didn't work in isolation. They built on centuries of local stone working knowledge, refining techniques passed down since Aksumite times. The angels in the oral traditions, they could symbolize this inherited wisdom, the divine inspiration of generations perfecting their craft. Even the timeline gap narrows when you consider that Lalibela might refer not just to a king, but to an entire era of construction bearing his name. What emerges isn't a contradiction, but a dialogue. The carbon-dated pottery and the angel's handprint both tell part of the story, one of human ingenuity rising to meet the divine, where faith and labor intertwined like the vines creeping over Lalibela's ancient walls. The truth, as always, lies in the tension between the dates etched in stone and those sung in hymns, between the hands that carved and the spirits believed to guide them. Who carved Lalibela's churches? The question haunts historians as much as the structures themselves. With no written records of the workforce, we're left piecing together clues from tool marks, oral traditions, and sheer physics. The scale is staggering. Conservative estimates suggest removing over 400,000 cubic feet of rock would require at least 40,000 worker years of labor. That's the equivalent of 1,000 people toiling daily for 4 decades. But were they slaves, paid craftsmen, or devout volunteers? The answer rewrites everything we assume about medieval Africa's social structures. Start with the darkest theory, slave labor. Some point to Lalibela's era coinciding with peak trafficking routes across the Red Sea, where captives from interior Africa were sold to Arab and Indian markets. Could the Zagwe dynasty have exploited similar systems? the logistics suggest otherwise. Enslaved workers under coercion rarely achieve the precision seen in Lalibela's delicate carvings. Sullen hands don't craft perfect archivolts or feather-light fretwork. More damningly, Ethiopian chronicles from the period explicitly condemn slavery as an offense to God, with King Lalibela himself praised for freeing bondsmen. The church's walls tell another tale. Tool marks show careful, repetitive strokes by artisans who clearly mastered their craft through years of practice, not forced toil. Then there's the paid artisan theory. Lalibela sits along ancient trade routes where gold, ivory, and salt flowed wealth that could have hired skilled labor. Axumite stonemasons had honed rock-carving techniques for centuries, and their descendants may have been lured by wages or prestige. But payroll records don't exist, and the site's isolation makes sustained payment unlikely. How would workers haul food and supplies up 2.5 miles of mountainous terrain? Compensation in kind, grain, livestock, or tax exemptions leaves no trace in the archaeological record. This leaves the most compelling possibility: volunteerism. Ethiopian tradition insists the builders were spiritually moved citizens working in shifts, their labor an act of collective devotion. Pilgrims still reenact this today, gathering annually to clear debris from the trenches in rituals called muwad. The workforce might have been seasonal farmers carving during agricultural lulls, drawn by the promise of heavenly rewards rather than coin. This explains the variations in craftsmanship. Some pillars show apprentice-level work alongside masterful reliefs, suggesting a continuum of skill levels united by shared purpose. The logistics still boggle the mind. Without beasts of burden or wheeled carts, workers likely passed rock debris hand to hand in human chains. Food would have been sourced locally. Archaeologists find remnants of teff grain and chickpeas in nearby pits, fuels for high-altitude labor. Water came from ingeniously engineered cisterns that trapped mountain runoff. Most remarkably, the workforce seems to have self-organized. Tool marks reveal standardized techniques spreading across teams, as if knowledge was shared in communal training. This wasn't a top-down construction site, but a societal undertaking where every strike of the chisel was a prayer made physical. Perhaps the truth blends all theories. Court artisans may have directed volunteers, their expertise guiding communal fervor, or perhaps the workforce evolved early phases relying on paid specialists, later stages buoyed by popular devotion as the site's holiness grew. What's undeniable is the result, a testament not to one king's ambition, but to thousands of unnamed hands who believed carving rock was akin to touching the divine. Their legacy isn't just in the churches that survive, but in the echo of their collective faith, a force so powerful it moved mountains, one chip of stone at a time. The volcanic tuff surrounding Lalibela's churches tells a silent story, one etched not by chisels but by centuries of wind and rain. Look closely at certain walls, especially near their bases, and you'll notice something peculiar: deep, undulating grooves that don't match the clean lines of medieval tool marks. These scars resemble the weathering patterns seen in ancient riverbeds or wind-swept canyons, the kind that take thousands of years to form. A growing number of researchers argue this erosion suggests parts of Lalibela might predate King Lalibela's 12th century project by millennia, potentially pushing their origins back to an era when the region's landscape looked radically different. The controversy centers on Biete Gabriel Rufale, where the lower third of the exterior walls shows textbook examples of fluvial erosion, precise, horizontal bands of weathering consistent with prolonged water exposure. Yet the church sits high above the nearest river valley, on terrain that hasn't seen significant flooding since the last ice age. Geologists backing this theory point to similar erosion in Egypt's Sphinx enclosure, where watermarks indicate a far wetter climate around 10,000 years ago. Could segments of Lalibela have been carved during that distant epoch, then rediscovered and repurposed by medieval builders? Proponents note that the church's lower chambers often feel oddly disconnected from their upper levels, like additions grafted onto pre-existing structures. Opponents counter with climate records showing Ethiopia's highlands experienced heavy monsoon cycles as recently as 4,000 years ago, enough to cause localized erosion without requiring an ice age origin. They also highlight the precision of Lalibela's Christian iconography, crosses, saints, and biblical scenes etched into the very walls that supposedly predate Christianity itself. But the erosion theory isn't easily dismissed. Certain tunnels beneath the churches show stratification patterns in the rock that suggest multiple phases of excavation, with older, rounded passageways abruptly meeting sharper, more recent cuts. The most compelling evidence might lie in the church's alignment with long-vanished waterways. Satellite surveys reveal dry riverbeds snaking through the highlands, their paths aligning eerily with Lalibela's erosion patterns. If these channels were active when the first cuts were made, it would place initial construction during Africa's so-called Green Sahara period, an era when the continent's interior was lush with lakes and grasslands. Local oral traditions add fuel to the fire, with some elders speaking of the first builders who worked the stone before vanishing into legend. Dating attempts only deepen the puzzle. Radiocarbon tests on organic material in mortar residues consistently return medieval dates, but these samples only confirm when the churches were last modified, not first carved. Meanwhile, thermoluminescence dating of fire-exposed rock surfaces hints at much earlier thermal events, perhaps from torches used by prehistoric workers. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church cautiously acknowledges the possibility of older roots, framing it as divine providence. God prepared the stone so his servants might later glorify him. Whether carved by Neolithic hands or shaped entirely by medieval devotion, the erosion patterns remind us that Lalibela's truth isn't set in stone. It's worn into it layer by layer, waiting for the patient observer to read its grooves like the rings of an ancient tree. The churches stand at the crossroads of myth and geology, where every weathering mark is a question without a single answer. 8 centuries of wind and rain have left their mark on Lalibela's churches, but the greatest threats to these ancient wonders are alarmingly modern. The same soft volcanic tuff that made the rock so workable for medieval artisans now makes them dangerously vulnerable to erosion. Every rainy season, water seeps into hairline cracks, freezing at high altitudes and expanding the fissures wider, a process called frost wedging that's slowly eating away at delicate carvings. In Biete Medhane, entire sections of biblical reliefs have blurred into ghostly outlines, their once crisp details softened like wax under a flame. Even the breath of thousands of pilgrims carries risk. The humidity from their exhalations condenses on cool stone, fostering algae growth that stains walls with greenish-black splotches. Tourism, while economically vital, has become a double-edged sword. Pre-pandemic visitor numbers soared past 50,000 annually, their footsteps wearing down staircases by millimeters each year. The worst damage appears in Biete Giyorgis, where centuries of hands gripping the same spots during descent have polished grooves into the rock deep enough to hold rainwater. Unofficial guides sometimes lead visitors off path, causing collapses in fragile tunnel systems. A 2018 incident in Biete Gabriel saw an entire decorative frieze crumble after a tourist leaned against it for a photo. The irony is painful. The very awe that draws people to Lalibela is accelerating its decay. Then there's the ever-present seismic threat. Ethiopia sits atop the seismically active East African Rift, and tremors in 1994 and 2017 caused visible cracks in several churches. Engineers discovered something alarming: the church's foundations aren't anchored to bedrock but sit on layers of compacted debris, making them unnervingly vulnerable to lateral shaking. A major quake could literally topple these monolithic structures like dominoes. UNESCO intervention has turned the site into a laboratory for cutting-edge preservation. Italian engineers installed an ingenious umbrella-like steel canopy over Biete Medhane Alem, its translucent panels diverting rain while allowing sunlight to filter through as it always did. Below ground, French geologists injected a plant-based resin into cracks, a biodegradable glue stronger than concrete but flexible enough to move with the stone. Perhaps most striking are the nearly invisible measures, vibration sensors embedded in walls that alert conservators to tourist overcrowding, and microclimate monitors tracking humidity shifts from visitor breath. Local priests initially resisted these interventions, fearing modernization would dilute the site's sanctity. But when restorers used 14th-century recipes mixing crushed volcanic scoria with egg whites to create historically accurate patching mortar, even traditionalists conceded. Today's preservation blends old and new. Monks still anoint walls with sacred oils to strengthen their spirit, while drones map erosion patterns invisible to the human eye. The goal isn't to freeze Lalibela in time, but to prolong its slow conversation with the elements, a dialogue between human devotion and geological inevitability that's lasted 800 years and counting. To step into Lalibela today is to witness faith carved not just in stone, but in the very rhythm of daily life. These churches aren't relics frozen in time. They pulse with the heartbeat of Ethiopian orthodoxy, hosting rituals that have continued unbroken for centuries. Every morning before dawn, priests in vivid vestments emerge from shadowed alcoves, their voices rising in jazz chants older than the buildings themselves. The scent of burning frankincense curls through carved windows as worshippers press foreheads against cool stone walls, their whispered prayers mingling with echoes from the 12th century. This is no museum, it's a living sanctuary where the divine feels palpably close. The pinnacle of this sacred calendar is Timkat, Ethiopia's raucous, radiant celebration of Epiphany each January. Pilgrims by the thousands converge on Lalibela, transforming the rocky trenches into rivers of white robes and flickering candles. The night before the feast, priests retrieve replicas of the Ark of the Covenant called tabots from each church, wrapping them in embroidered cloths as drums pound and dancers whirl under starry skies. At dawn, the high priest raises a golden cross above the waters of the symbolic Jordan Trench, blessing the crowd as they surge forward to be rebaptized in ice-cold springs. It's a spectacle of joy and devotion where teenagers splash alongside elders, their laughter bouncing off walls that have witnessed this same ritual for 800 years. Beyond Timkat's exuberance, Lalibela's quieter rituals reveal even deeper layers of meaning. Take the weekly mescal celebrations where priests trace elaborate processions through the rock-hewn tunnels, their crimson and gold umbrellas catching shafts of sunlight. Or the Lenten fasts when entire communities gather in church courtyards to share handfuls of roasted barley, sustaining body and spirit through hours of nocturnal prayer. The churches become extensions of home. Women nurse babies during all-night vigils, children doze against pillars while psalms echo overhead, and elders teach Bible stories by pointing to frescoes worn smooth by generations of fingertips. This continuity isn't accidental. When foreign invaders threatened Lalibela in the 16th century, priests bricked up tunnel entrances and concealed sacred artifacts within hollow pillars. During Italy's 20th century occupation, locals camouflaged church roofs with brushwood to evade bomber pilots. Even today, when UNESCO engineers propose preservation measures, priests insist any modern materials mustn't disrupt the flow of worship, a reminder that these stones were made for prayer first, posterity second. The most profound testament to Lalibela's living faith might be its deacons. Boys as young as 7 train for decades to master the church's intricate oral traditions, memorizing psalms in ancient jazz while learning to sway with heavy processional crosses balanced on their shoulders. Their schooling happens not in classrooms but in the churches themselves, where the carved saints seem to watch approvingly from the walls. When one young deacon was asked why he dedicated his life to preserving these rituals, his answer echoed across centuries: because the stones remember the prayers. In an age of dwindling church attendance elsewhere, Lalibela's endurance is no small miracle. Teenagers snap selfies against medieval facades, then pause to kiss the same doorframes their ancestors did. Tour guides recite architectural facts one moment, then bow reverently before altars the next. The churches have become both national icons and intimate sanctuaries where faith isn't just studied, but lived, breathed, and passed hand to hand like the honey wax candles glowing in perpetual devotion. Whether bathed in Timcat's golden light or hushed in pre-dawn stillness, Lalibela remains what it always was: not a monument to the past, but a bridge between earth and heaven, its arches trembling with the weight of centuries of whispered amens. Across the globe, ancient civilizations left their mark by carving wonders directly into the earth, yet none quite mirror Lalibela's blend of artistry and enduring devotion. Take Jordan's Petra, its rose-red facades towering over desert canyons. Like Lalibela, it was chiseled from soft sandstone, but the similarities end there. Petra's tombs and temples were carved into cliff faces, their grand entrances meant to awe from afar. Lalibela's builders took the opposite approach, burrowing downward to create freestanding structures hidden until you stand at their edges. While Petra's Nabateans abandoned their city by the 7th century, leaving it to archaeologists and tourists, Lalibela's churches have never ceased echoing with hymns, a living sacred site where the past and present merge seamlessly. India's Ellora caves present another fascinating counterpoint. The Kailasa temple there, dedicated to Shiva, shares Lalibela's monolithic ambition, an entire mountaintop painstakingly whittled into a temple complex over generations. Both sites demonstrate jaw-dropping precision, but their purposes diverge dramatically. Ellora's carvings celebrate a pantheon of Hindu deities, their dynamism frozen in dancing stone figures, while Lalibela's austere interiors focus the mind purely on Christian worship. Where Ellora's walls ripple with intricate bas-reliefs of gods and goddesses, Lalibela's geometric crosses and simple arches draw the eye upward, as if guiding prayers toward heaven. Even their preservation tells different stories. Ellora's dry climate kept carvings crisp, while Lalibela's highland rains have softened edges, adding a poignant vulnerability to its sacred spaces. Then there's Egypt's Abu Simbel, where Ramses II's colossal statues guard a sun temple carved deep into a mountainside. The engineering feats parallel Lalibela's, both sites aligned with celestial events, Abu Simbel's inner sanctum lighting up twice yearly for the king's birthday. But Abu Simbel was a monument to pharaonic ego, while Lalibela's churches hum with collective humility. When modern engineers relocated Abu Simbel to escape Nile flooding, they severed its connection to the original landscape. Lalibela, by contrast, remains rooted in its soil, every trench and tunnel still serving the rituals they were designed for centuries ago. What truly sets Lalibela apart isn't just technique, it's tangible continuity. Petra's caves sit silent, Ellora's temples are museums, Abu Simbel's altars no longer host offerings. But in Lalibela, the same footsteps that wore grooves into the stairs 800 years ago still climb them today. The same incense that scented medieval prayers still curls through carved windows each morning. This isn't just architecture frozen in time, it's faith carved in stone, still breathing, still alive. Among the most tantalizing and controversial theories about Lalibela's construction are whispers of lost technologies, methods so advanced they've since vanished from history. Ethiopian oral traditions speak of fire that melts stone, a mysterious substance or tool that could soften rock like clay, allowing artisans to mold intricate details with ease before the material hardened again. Some versions of the legend claim this knowledge came from the heavens, gifted to King Lalibela by angels who demonstrated its use under the cover of darkness. Skeptics dismiss it as poetic metaphor, but fascinating clues linger in the churches themselves, sections of wall with glass-like smoothness, as if the stone had been momentarily liquefied and left to set. Modern materials science offers surprising support. Certain volcanic rocks, including varieties of tuff, contain minerals that weaken when heated to specific temperatures. Experiments show that heating such stone to around 600 degrees Celsius makes it temporarily malleable, soft enough to carve with primitive tools, yet capable of regaining hardness as it cools. Could Lalibela's builders have discovered this property? Local legends describe priests using sacred flames to prepare the rock, and recent thermal imaging has detected unusual heat patterns in church walls, concentrated around areas with the most intricate carvings. Even the scorch marks, once dismissed as accidental, might tell a different story: deliberate applications of controlled fire to alter the stone's workability. Then there's the curious case of the impossible drill holes. Several churches feature perfectly cylindrical shafts, some no wider than a thumb, bored straight through solid tuff. Recreating these with medieval tools proves baffling. Hand drilling such precise holes would require bits harder than the rock itself, yet no trace of diamond or obsidian drills has been found. Alternative theories suggest an ancient form of ultrasonic drilling, perhaps using vibrating rods tipped with abrasive slurries, a technique some claim was employed in pre-Columbian America. Others point to enigmatic carvings near Lalibela's quarries, showing figures holding rod-like devices aimed at stone faces, surrounded by swirling patterns resembling heat waves. The most radical theories venture into territory mainstream archaeology avoids. Some researchers highlight Lalibela's uncanny structural stability, churches standing for 8 centuries without foundations, surviving earthquakes that toppled modern buildings. Their secret, a rumored mortar made from pulverized volcanic glass mixed with organic resins, creating a flexible adhesive that moves with the earth. Similar recipes appear in medieval Arabic texts describing living stone techniques lost after the Crusades. Even more speculative are claims of acoustic levitation, citing Ethiopian manuscripts that speak of singing stones moved into place by harmonic vibrations. While such ideas stretch credibility, they reflect a deeper truth. Lalibela's methods were so extraordinary, they've spawned explanations ranging from the plausible to the fantastical. Perhaps the most compelling evidence of advanced methods isn't in the stone, but in the absence of debris. Excavating 11 churches would have generated enough rubble to reshape the local landscape, yet Lalibela's surroundings show no massive spoil heaps. Some propose the builders pulverized waste rock into powder, mixing it with water to form a primitive concrete used in hidden structural supports. Others suggest systematic removal. Oral histories mention roads of dust, where porters carried away basketloads of debris for disposal in distant valleys. But the most haunting possibility is that they didn't need to remove much at all. If the fire that melts stone legend holds even partial truth, perhaps excess material was liquefied and reabsorbed into the living rock, leaving almost no trace behind. In the end, these theories, whether grounded in chemistry or veering toward myth, reveal less about ancient technologies than about our own fascination with Lalibela's enigma. The churches defy easy categorization, standing at the crossroads of faith, science, and human ingenuity. Whether shaped by angelic flames or simply the slow, determined strike of countless chisels, their true power lies in the questions they provoke, reminders that history's greatest wonders often dwell in the space between what we can prove and what we dare to imagine. Modern tools are rewriting the story of Lalibela's hidden depths, not by dismantling its mysteries, but by peering through stone with technologies medieval builders could scarcely imagine. In 2018, a team of archaeologists armed with ground-penetrating radar made a startling discovery beneath Biete Giyorgis, a network of chambers and tunnels extending far beyond the known passages, their layout suggesting a deliberate, grid-like design. The scans revealed voids with sharp, geometric edges. No natural cave system forms perfect 90-degree angles, hinting at spaces sealed off centuries ago, perhaps to protect sacred objects or conceal rituals from outsiders. These hidden rooms aren't anomalies. Similar scans at Biete Medhane detected symmetrical cavities behind interior walls, their purpose encrypted in silence. Lalibela has painted an even more dramatic picture. When lasers mapped the surrounding highlands from aircraft, they exposed faint outlines of quarry roads and half-carved blocks camouflaged by vegetation, evidence that Lalibela's construction zone stretched far beyond the current complex. Most intriguing are the depressions resembling unfinished church foundations, their cruciform shapes mirroring Biete Giyorgis but abandoned mid-construction. Were these casualties of a shifting royal mandate, or did builders encounter geological faults that forced them to relocate? The Lalibela data can't answer why, but it proves Lalibela was never meant to be just 11 churches. This was a sprawling holy city interrupted, its full vision frozen in the landscape. 3D modeling has revolutionized understanding of the construction process itself. By digitizing every chisel mark and erosion pattern, researchers reconstructed the step-by-step sequence used to carve Biete Medhane Alem. The simulations reveal a genius workaround. Builders left temporary support columns of uncarved rock as they excavated downward, removing them only after ceilings were fully stabilized, a technique mirrored in modern tunneling projects. Other models highlight acoustic quirks. Certain tunnels amplify specific chant frequencies, suggesting medieval artisans tuned the stone like a musical instrument to enhance sacred harmonies. Yet these technologies come with ethical tightropes. When thermal imaging detected heat signatures beneath Biete Mariam's altar, possibly indicating metal artifacts, church authorities halted further investigation, fearing disturbance of consecrated ground. Similarly, attempts to scan sealed chambers near Biete Golgotha were blocked by priests who cited ancient prohibitions against rousing what sleeps. This tension between discovery and devotion isn't unique to Lalibela, but here it carries extra weight. Every scan risks demystifying a site where faith depends on the unseen. The most poignant findings aren't structural but human. High-resolution scans of tool marks show variations in stroke depth and angle, allowing archaeologists to distinguish individual worker styles. In Biete Medhane, one particularly meticulous craftsman left behind a signature of sorts. Consistent 45-degree chisel strikes near door frames, a flourish absent elsewhere. These invisible fingerprints remind us that behind the legends of angels and miracles stood real people, artisans whose names are lost but whose hands shaped eternity. What emerges isn't just a map of hidden chambers, but a dialogue between past and present. The same churches that defy conventional archaeology now bend cutting-edge science to their secrets, proving some mysteries refuse to surrender entirely. Each scan answers one question only to pose three more, ensuring Lalibela's greatest gift endures, the relentless wonder of the unknown. Step inside any of Lalibela's churches, and the walls come alive with color and symbolism, not just decorations but a visual language etched in pigment and stone. The frescoes adorning these sacred spaces aren't mere artwork. They're theological manuscripts painted in ochre, indigo, and gold, each stroke a deliberate act of devotion. Look up in Biete Mariam and you'll find the Virgin Mary cradling Christ, her robes rendered in vibrant reds, a hue reserved for divinity in Ethiopian tradition. Beside her, archangels with almond-shaped eyes and solemn expressions guard the sanctuary, their wings patterned with intricate geometric designs that echo Aksumite textiles. These aren't generic biblical scenes, they're distinctly Ethiopian interpretations, blending Coptic influences with local artistry. The carvings tell an even deeper story. In Biete Medhane Alem, slender crosses known as African Lalibela crosses intertwine with vines and mythical creatures, a motif unseen in European Christianity. These designs mirror the iron processional crosses carried by priests to this day, linking the stonework to living rituals. One particularly enigmatic panel shows a lion and lamb lying side by side, not the biblical peaceable kingdom, but a reference to the Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's sacred text claiming descent from Solomon and Sheba. Such details suggest the artisans weren't just copying imported templates, they were asserting a uniquely African Christian identity. Some of the most revealing carvings hide in plain sight. The ceiling of Biete Golgotha bears a peculiar relief, a cluster of grapes so meticulously detailed, each berry seems to swell from the rock. To Western eyes, it might symbolize the Eucharist, but Ethiopian tradition reads it as a nod to the legend of Saint Yerd, the 6th century composer who was inspired by watching grapes drip juice onto a spider's web. This connection to local saints, absent from broader Christian iconography, hints that the craftsmen hailed from Ethiopia's monastic schools, where such stories were daily lessons. Then there's the color palette itself. Unlike the jewel tones of Byzantine art, Lalibela's pigments are earthy, ground from local minerals like basalt for black, clay for red, and crushed malachite for green. The painters didn't just use what was available, they chose hues with symbolic weight. Blue, made from rare imported lapis lazuli, appears only around depictions of heaven, while the abundant red ochre mirrors the surrounding highland soil, rooting the sacred in the very earth of Ethiopia. Even the brushstrokes carry meaning. X-rays reveal layers of paint mixed with myrrh and incense, turning each mural into a sensory experience that released fragrance when warmed by candlelight. Perhaps the most telling detail lies in the saints' faces. Unlike the homogenized features of European medieval art, Lalibela's figures have full lips, broad noses, and braided hair unmistakably African. A striking example in Biete Amenul shows Saint George, not as the pale knight of Western lore, but as a dark-skinned warrior atop a rearing horse, his spear aimed at a dragon modeled after Ethiopia's indigenous hyenas. This wasn't accidental, it was a declaration. At a time when global Christianity often equated holiness with Eurocentric features, Lalibela's artists proclaimed their saints as kin, their salvation as local as the rock they carved. Hidden in these artworks are subtle construction clues too. The pigment's chemical composition matches samples from pottery found in nearby 12th century workshops, confirming the timeline of King Lalibela's reign. Tool marks near fresco edges reveal that painters worked alongside masons, applying pigments while the stone was still slightly porous, a technique preventing later flaking. Even the subject matter offers hints. The absence of certain popular medieval saints like Francis of Assisi suggests the artwork predates the 13th century, when Italian missionaries brought new influences. But the true power of these images lies beyond archaeology. Watch a modern priest trace his fingers over a fading apostle's face during liturgy, or hear a deacon explain the carvings to wide-eyed children, and you realize these aren't relics, they're still speaking. The grapevines and crosses, the dark-skinned angels and mythical beasts all whisper the same truth. Faith here wasn't imported. It was, and is, as native as the volcanic rock itself, shaped by hands that refused to separate their love of God from the land that bore them. Every chiseled saint, every pigment-stained halo, stands as proof that holiness needs no passport. It blooms where it's planted, even in the unlikeliest stone. Just beyond the main cluster of Lalibela's majestic rock-hewn churches stands a haunting anomaly, Biete Lehem, the unfinished church. Unlike its completed counterparts with their soaring arches and intricate carvings, this structure remains frozen in mid-creation, its rough-hewn walls and jagged outlines offering a rare glimpse into the staggering ambition and sudden interruption of Lalibela's sacred project. Step inside its half-carved nave, and you're not just visiting a church, you're stepping onto a medieval construction site abandoned centuries ago, where the tools seem to have vanished mid-stroke and the voices of workers still linger in the air. The first clue to Biete Leham's mystery lies in its floor plan. Unlike the symmetrical perfection of Biete Giyorgis or the sprawling grandeur of Biete Medhane Alem, this church's layout feels oddly disjointed. The eastern apse is fully carved, complete with an altar slab, while the western wall barely emerges from the rock, its outline traced in shallow grooves. Chisel marks here aren't the refined, parallel strokes seen elsewhere. They're frantic, uneven, as if workers rushed or were abruptly called away, the most telling detail. A series of vertical channels along the walls, precisely spaced at arm's length apart. Archaeologists recognize these as quarrying guides, used to split large sections of rock before finer carving began. Their presence confirms Biete Lehem was never meant to look this rough. It was caught in the earliest phase of construction, a skeleton never given flesh. Why was it abandoned? Local priests whisper of a divine warning, a vision commanding King Lalibela to halt work immediately. Historians propose more earthly explanations. The rock quality here differs from other churches. Scans reveal hidden fissures that could have made further carving dangerously unstable. There's also evidence of a major water source beneath the site, perhaps a spring disrupted by excavation, turning the floor into an unpredictable swamp. But the most compelling theory ties Biete Lehem's fate to politics. Carbon dating of charcoal fragments found in the trench points to construction halting around 1220, coinciding with recorded unrest in the Zagwe dynasty. If rival factions were closing in, resources might have been diverted to fortifications, leaving this church eternally waiting. Yet Biete Lehem's incompleteness makes it invaluable. Its exposed surfaces show techniques usually hidden in finished churches, like the step carving method, where workers cut descending tiers into the rock, each layer acting as a scaffold for the next. The ceiling reveals something even rarer, a network of shallow, circular depressions where wooden beams were once wedged. These weren't structural supports but measuring stations, used to calculate thickness as workers hollowed downward, ensuring they didn't breach the church's future roof. Such details prove the builders' sophistication, their ability to plan entire spaces in reverse, envisioning voids where others saw only solid rock. The most poignant discovery came in 2019, when archaeologists brushing dust from a corner uncovered a cluster of artifacts frozen in time. A leather worker's glove hardened with age, a clay oil lamp still smudged with soot, and a stonemason's chisel, its iron edge worn down to a nub. These weren't ritual objects or treasures, they were everyday tools dropped and forgotten. The chisel's condition speaks volumes. Its metal is thinner than examples found in completed churches, suggesting materials grew scarce as the project faltered. The lamp's wick, analyzed under microscopes, showed traces of olive oil imported from the Mediterranean, a luxury that abruptly disappears from later excavation layers. Together, they paint a picture of a site straining under dwindling resources, where even light became a precious commodity. Today, Biete Lehem serves an unexpected purpose. During heavy rains, water cascades through its unfinished trenches, pooling in carved channels that funnel it away from completed churches downstream. What medieval workers left as a failure has become an accidental masterpiece of hydraulic engineering, protecting the very structures it was meant to resemble. Pilgrims still visit, not to pray before altars but to press their palms against the rough walls, feeling the last touches of hands that worked here 8 centuries ago. In its way, Biete Lehem is more moving than any finished church, a testament not to perfection but to the fragility of human ambition and the strange beauty of what remains when grand visions collide with reality. The allure of Lalibela's rock-hewn churches has long transcended their physical walls, seeping into the realm of popular culture where they've inspired everything from blockbuster films to speculative fiction. Hollywood's fascination with the site reached its peak in the 1980s, when producers for an unmade Indiana Jones sequel scouted Lalibela as a potential setting for a quest involving the Ark of the Covenant, an idea fueled by Ethiopia's own legends linking the churches to the sacred relic. While the film never materialized, echoes of Lalibela's labyrinthine tunnels and towering crosses can be seen in the franchise's later adventures, where hidden temples and ancient traps owe a clear debt to Ethiopia's real-life marvels. Video game designers have similarly drawn from Lalibela's mystique. The critically acclaimed game Assassin's Creed Origins features a DLC mission where players explore a fictionalized version of the churches, solving puzzles inspired by their celestial alignments. Even more strikingly, the indie horror game The Forgotten City models its claustrophobic underground passages after Lalibela's sacred tunnels, transforming them into a nightmarish labyrinth where every shadow holds secrets. These digital recreations aren't just aesthetic homages, they capture the essence of the site's enigmatic atmosphere where history and mythology blur seamlessly. Literature, too, has woven Lalibela into its tapestries. In The Shadow of the Sun, Polish journalist Ryszard Kapuscinski describes the churches as a metaphysical argument carved in stone, their very existence challenging Western assumptions about African history. Meanwhile, speculative fiction like Tad Williams' Otherland series reimagines Lalibela as a virtual reality puzzle box guarding apocalyptic secrets. Perhaps most poignant is Ethiopian writer Maza Mengiste's The Shadow King, where the churches serve as silent witnesses to Italy's brutal invasion, their stones absorbing the prayers of the oppressed. Documentaries have oscillated between reverence and sensationalism. The BBC's Sacred Wonders portrays Lalibela as a living testament to faith, while fringe theories in programs like Ancient Aliens bizarrely attribute its construction to extraterrestrial technology, a narrative local scholars vehemently reject. Striking a balance, the Ethiopian-produced Zion in Africa frames the site as both an architectural wonder and a symbol of post-colonial identity, challenging viewers to see beyond the exoticism often imposed by outside lenses. Even music has paid tribute. Jazz legend Duke Ellington composed the Lalibela Suite after visiting in 1973, its saxophone melodies mimicking the echo of chants bouncing off stone walls. More recently, Ethiopian-American musician Meklet Hadero's You Are the Light samples the rhythmic strikes of modern-day craftsmen maintaining the churches, blending ancient and contemporary in a haunting auditory tapestry. What makes Lalibela's cultural footprint so enduring isn't just its visual drama, but its layers of meaning. To filmmakers, it's the ultimate adventure set. To game designers, a ready-made dungeon of mysteries. To writers, a metaphor for resilience. Yet these interpretations often overshadow the living traditions they borrow from a tension keenly felt by locals who watch their sacred spaces rebranded as exotic backdrops. The church's true power lies in their duality, their global icons and intimate sanctuaries, at once belonging to the world and fiercely guarded by those who have kept their candles lit for 8 unbroken centuries. The moment you step into Lalibela's shadowed trenches, the air itself seems to thicken with centuries of whispered prayers. Travelers often describe an almost physical sensation, a tingling at the base of the neck, a catch in the breath as they first glimpse the sunken churches. British historian Sylvia Pankhurst, visiting in 1954, wrote of feeling the weight of time dissolve, her carefully documented measurements forgotten as she traced her fingers over a pillar worn smooth by generations of devout hands. More recently, a Japanese architect collapsed to his knees upon entering Biete Giyorgis, overwhelmed by the precision of its cruciform roof. This wasn't built, he insisted to his guide, voice trembling. It was revealed as if the builders merely peeled away what didn't belong. For Ethiopian pilgrims, the experience cuts deeper still. Elderly women in white shawls shuffle through the tunnels clutching flickering candles, their lips moving in silent recitation of psalms memorized in childhood. One deacon recounted a blind man who spent hours running his hands along Biete Mariam's frescoes, declaring he could see the colors with his soul. During Timkat, the annual Epiphany celebration, the trenches transform into rivers of undulating white robes as thousands chant and clap, their collective energy vibrating through the stone. A visiting anthropologist from Addis Ababa described watching a young mother press her baby's forehead against a carved saint's face, not in supplication but introduction. She was presenting her child to ancestors 800 years gone, he realized, as if the walls were family. Scholars, too, find their academic detachment crumbling. Dr. Elemayahu Wassi, a structural engineer who came to study seismic resilience, abandoned his laser levels on the third day. The numbers stopped mattering, he confessed in a now famous lecture. How do you quantify the intention behind every chisel strike? These builders poured their faith into the rock. His team later discovered microfractures in the tuff that should, by all laws of physics, have caused collapse centuries ago, yet the churches stand, defying textbook logic. Even seasoned travelers falter when describing Lalibela's intangible power. A French photojournalist, having documented war zones worldwide, broke down while trying to capture dawn light filtering through Biete Amenul's cross-shaped window. "The camera lies," she wrote later. "It flattens the depth, mutes the echoes of chants that seem to rise from the stone itself." Modern visitors frequently report synesthetic experiences, the scent of frankincense tasting like honey on the tongue, the drone of prayer drums vibrating as color behind closed eyelids. Perhaps the most haunting account comes from a 19th century Russian monk who spent a night alone in Biete Golgotha's inner chamber. His diary describes shadows that moved against the candlelight without wind, and a warmth radiating from the altar slab despite the mountain chill. When dawn came, he found his normally precise Cyrillic handwriting had transformed into flowing jazz script, Ethiopia's ancient liturgical language, though he'd never studied it. The journal page survives in a monastery outside Moscow, its ink still startlingly black, a mystery as enduring as Lalibela itself. These aren't just tourist impressions, they're encounters with a space that refuses to be merely observed. Whether it's the physicist who swears his compass spun wildly near Biete Gabriel's hidden chamber, or the Ethiopian-American teenager who wept uncontrollably upon recognizing her grandmother's features in a carved saint's face, Lalibela reshapes all who enter. The churches don't just house devotion, they demand participation, turning spectators into witnesses, visitors into pilgrims. Long after footsteps fade from the trenches, the stones keep their stories, waiting for the next trembling hand to trace the grooves and listen. 8 centuries after their creation, the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela still stand as a testament to the inseparable dance between faith and human determination. What lingers isn't just the awe of their construction, how medieval craftsmen carved downward into volcanic tuff with nothing but iron tools and relentless perseverance, but the deeper questions that cling to every chisel mark. Were these churches shaped by divine intervention, as the whispered legends of angelic labor suggest? Or do they embody something even more profound, the limitless potential of collective belief, where ordinary hands achieve the extraordinary when driven by sacred purpose? The truth, perhaps, lies somewhere in between, a harmony of earthly skill and celestial inspiration, where the line between miracle and mastery blurs like candlelight flickering across ancient frescoes. Consider the unresolved riddles that continue to tantalize scholars. The precision of Biete Giyorgis' cross-shaped roof, aligned to cast perfect shadows during equinoxes. The eerie absence of tool evidence, as if the builders deliberately vanished their methods into the highland mists. The whispers of hidden chambers beneath Biete Gabriel, their contents known only to generations of priests. Even modern technology, ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR scans, only deepens the intrigue, revealing networks of tunnels and voids that defy conventional timelines. Lalibela refuses to surrender its secrets, not out of stubbornness but as an invitation. An invitation to wonder, to debate, to stand in those sunken courtyards and feel the weight of history pressing against your skin. This UNESCO World Heritage Site isn't just a destination, it's a conversation spanning generations. Whether you're drawn by the architectural brilliance, the spiritual resonance, or the sheer audacity of its creation, Lalibela rewards every visitor with a glimpse into humanity's capacity for the sublime. So we turn to you now. What do you believe lies at the heart of this enigma? Are the churches proof of forgotten technologies, divine craftsmanship, or something even more unexpected? Share your theories in the comments, and if your travels ever take you to Ethiopia's rugged highlands, step softly through those sacred trenches. Let your fingers brush the same walls that have absorbed 800 years of prayers and listen closely. The stones might not speak in words, but their silence echoes with answers waiting.